Power to the people. Power to the people. All right, great. Thank you. It's so good to be here, and I want to thank Workers World for inviting me to speak at this very pivotal. I can think of so many adjectives, crucial and perilous, and I could go on, but I think it's wonderful that so many people want to know more about Venezuela. Sometimes we may be preaching to the choir, but we're also speaking to other people, so I may make some points that I'm sure all of you know, but this is also an opportunity to educate others. The danger that we're all in now, let us be clear, comes from the United States. The United States is, once again, to blame for the suffering of Venezuelans. For months now, we have been hearing about people going hungry, people fleeing the country, and these things are true. However, all of their problems are caused by the United States. It's U.S. sanctions that are starving people in Venezuela. And I think it's interesting that we're constantly told socialism doesn't work. Just look at Venezuela. Now, nobody ever points to a capitalist nation where there's starvation and people fleeing and says, look at them, look how bad things are over there. That proves capitalism doesn't work. You could do it if you really wanted to make an honest argument. But I think it's important to point out the United States has caused the suffering of people in that country. Even before last week in this coup attempt, U.S. sanctions are in effect international sanctions. Not only are American individuals and corporations, financial institutions forbidden by law from doing business with Venezuela, but the United States also threatens to sanction and punish anybody else who wants to. So suppose the country said, we don't care what the United States does, we want to do business with Venezuela. Well, that means they can't have financial transactions with the U.S. So the entire world is forbidden to help this country, to help them renegotiate debts or sell their oil or any of the things that a country needs. So the United States is creating the suffering that this administration and the corporate media go on and on about. I think it's also important to talk about Donald Trump. Obviously, he's the President of the United States, and he is the person responsible for this most recent attack. And it's always easy to condemn him, and I think sometimes it's too easy. It's easy to say Trump is a fascist, Trump is terrible, he's a racist, he's an authoritarian. Yes, all those things are true, but he's not the first one. He is the third president of the United States since Hugo Chavez was elected and passed away, and then Maduro was elected. The third American president to wage war against Venezuela. George W. Bush attempted a coup. Obama started the sanctions and passed them on to Trump just days before he left office. He reauthorized sanctions and declared that Venezuela was a threat to the United States. And we also have to talk about leaders of the rest of the world, people like Justin Trudeau. Canada has been a partner of the U.S. in all of these attacks on Venezuela. And then the Europeans jump in. The UK and France and Germany and Spain all declared that unless Maduro, who was elected anyway, unless he calls elections again within a week, they will recognize this usurper, this Guaido. And it makes a mockery of the democracy that all these countries claim to believe in. We know Americans don't really claim about democracy. I mean, we really care about democracy. We have a system which lets the loser be the winner. We have a president who lost the popular vote, but he's still the one sitting in the White House. And I think it's interesting that Democrats did not protest when an election was stolen from Gore. May have been stolen from Hillary Clinton. She didn't want to count the votes, so we'll never know. That these same people who don't defend themselves will go to another country and claim to defend other people who are already practicing their democratic rights, like the people in Venezuela have done. And there were Democrats who immediately, members of the Senate and the House, who right away said they were supporting this coup attempt. Liberals, in quotes, like Richard Durbin of Illinois, Chris Murphy of Connecticut. I think Murphy even said it's good for the U.S. to be rid of Maduro. Durbin couched it a little, better. He says, "Oh, I met with Guaido." Why are you meeting with Guaido? You're a member of the United States Senate. Why are you meeting with the opposition of a sovereign nation? But that tells you that this has been in the works for a long time. It's important also to point out that so many of the things we read are just not true. We keep hearing people say Maduro he should negotiate with the opposition, he should talk to them. Well, I say, first of all, I don't know why he has to negotiate with anybody. He's the one who won more than once. But because of the pressure, the external pressure, he was in talks with the opposition. But the United States told them not to participate. They didn't run in the last election because the United States told them not to. So when you hear that he doesn't talk to the opposition, and it's just lies. Excuse me. I would urge you, I'll put in a plug for Black Agenda Report, for Venezuela Analysis, for Black Alliance for Peace, for Workers' World. Who am I missing? Somebody tell me something. There's a Fight Back News. Very good. There are many good sources where you can get this information that I just talked about. And this morning is something I wasn't surprised, but it was disturbing nonetheless. The New York Times gave Guaido an op-ed. And a picture of him at Mass. And there he is looking like a choir boy in a church. And that's called propaganda. Now, the Times, I am sure, censored responses. They censored the letters. I know they censored mine. Mine was just like 3 or 4 sentences. Mine wasn't seen. Others, I'm sure, were not. And this is very interesting to me. All these people who claim to be anti-Trump, when the deal goes down and it's time for imperialism to do what it does, suddenly they're all friends. So everybody forgets Russiagate, all these things they allegedly don't like about Trump. When it's time for the United States to be the bully, they all join together. So you have to be very careful about the corporate media, as always, but especially at times like this. And the New York Times, I'll go on a little more. You can't even complain. They don't even have an ombudsperson, which they used to have. And I wonder why they didn't do that. So my letter, and I guess that's why they censored it, my question was, are you going to have an op-ed for Maduro or for someone who supports him? And why can you not? You gave one to this guy who declares he's the president, and they say it was a huge crowd. But this was the day of a national holiday. There's always a big crowd. People weren't out there to see him. It was the anniversary of the end of a military takeover, and it's a big holiday in Venezuela. So it's the kind of thing that they always do in order to get public buy-in for their plans. And it's interesting to me that all of a sudden everybody's an expert on Venezuela's constitution. And people are quoting it. Well, Section 2, subsection 5 says that he's not the president anymore if it's nonsense. He was elected. That's what you need to know. And it's very important to always oppose U.S. interventions. They will tell you that there is a humanitarian catastrophe. Where have we heard that before? Libya, Syria, Ukraine. I mean, I know I'm leaving countries out. There's so many. And so they will always tell you that there's some bad person and the U.S. is good and is going to get rid of this bad person. And there are just a couple simple things. One, self-determination. The Venezuelan people have the right to have whatever government they choose. The United States should not have a right to do what it wants in the world. And Trump is just following. There's a lot more continuity, especially with foreign policy, than there is opposition from president to president. But Americans have to, I should say people from the U.S., because people in Venezuela are Americans. We have to stop believing these stories whenever the United States decides to destroy another country. We have to say no. If you say no, you're on the right side. And whatever may or may not be wrong with the foreign leader, it is up to people in that country to figure out for themselves. So, and I think if you say that, you're always, I think, always on solid ground, no matter what the country is, no matter what the particular circumstances are. It's safe to be opposed to U.S. sanctions. We cannot allow ourselves to be confused. So those are most of my remarks. I don't want to take too much time. So thank you all very much. I look forward to Q&A, and we'll have a chance to talk more together. Thank you. Sanctions are actually, they're contradicted by international law. But the U.S. has been doing this a long time. They've been doing it with, I believe Cuba may have been the first. That's the first one I can think of. But they just do it. And the United States is the bully, the gangster on the block. And so they will target a nation like Cuba, like Venezuela, Nicaragua, Iran, Zimbabwe, Syria, and they just make it up. And they'll declare that this nation is a risk to the security risk to the country, is run by terrorists, whatever they want to say. But the United States has the muscle. That's how they do it. They have the economic muscle for now, and the military muscle to get it done. So as I was saying, other countries obey out of fear. They don't want to be punished too. So any country that decides to defy the sanctions is itself sanctioned. And they don't, people are literally dying because of sanctions. People in Iran can't import medicine. All the countries that we've mentioned that were sanctioned. Nicaragua, they just imposed sanctions by a voice vote. And I frankly have to find out more about how that works in Congress, where people don't go on record and somehow a law is passed. So these Nicaraguan sanctions were passed in that underhanded way. It's pretty much the same. They just do the same thing. They just pick different targets. And until or unless the country does what the United States wants it to do, which generally means not having the government that people somewhere else want to have, they live under this threat. And it's war by other means. I mean, United States has officially declared war on Venezuela, but sanctions are war by other means. The United States wanted to make Colombia a member of NATO. And they have a special partnership or something of that kind, which is very, very dangerous. If it has the status of a NATO nation, if Colombia is attacked, if you attack if one NATO nation is attacked, all are attacked. So that means there's always a danger of a false flag, some sort of provocation, which can happen anywhere in the world, but it's particularly dangerous in Colombia. And why did this happen now? I think things started to go their way. Bolsonaro's election in Brazil, a new right-wing government in Ecuador. All of these things were, they saw as strengthening their hand in Venezuela, although I'm not convinced they're going to be successful. I believe there are, I think Maduro has means of fighting back. He has friends in the world. We forget, other countries that the U.S. targets have friends in the world and have their own alliances. So I think they may have bitten off more than they can handle in this particular case. A little bit of over-optimism, I think, but it shows the level of desperation It just continues where they can declare somebody a president or tell a lie about Gaddafi or anyone they want to attack, but the empire is in crisis despite having created all this havoc around the world. That seems to be all they can do, really, is create crises. They don't get exactly what it is they want, and they create new problems for themselves as they go.